Welcome to Gone Fishing, a show diving into the cybersecurity threats that surround our highly connected lives. Every human is different. Every person has unique vulnerabilities that expose them to potentially successful social engineering. On this show, we'll discuss human vulnerability and how it relates to unique individuals. I'm Connor Swalm, CEO of FinSecurity, and welcome to Gone Fishing. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Gone Fishing. I'm your host, Connor, CEO at Fin, and I am joined by the wonderful Alexandria Boyd, the Director of Sales at OIT VoIP. Alex, how are you doing?
I am doing well, Connor. Thanks so much for having me on today. I'm excited to finally be a part of this Gone Fishing podcast.
Gone Fishing. It's been a while. I feel like 2 years ago, I met you at your first conference, which was like 3 days after you started with Ray and OIT. Am I remembering that correctly?
It was not 3 days after I started, but I did. I asked to jump in the trade show circuit pretty early on because I am not new to the world of trade shows, so I did hop in pretty quick there. But yeah,
that's awesome. For folks who have no idea who you are, haven't met you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So, like you said, my name is Alexandria Boyd. I am the Director of Sales over at OIT VoIP. We provide partner programs for MSPs for unified communications. A little bit more about me. I'm an eccentric bird. I like to travel a lot. I have been all over. Traveling is one of my many passions. Also, fun fact, I like to spin fires. So that's a fun one that not a lot of people know, and it's kind of different.
Like with the rods of fire.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I would never do that.
I'm a fire sign, Connor. Come on, you should have known this.
Your hair is red like fire as well. So I guess it's on brand and I should have expected it.
Yeah, I'm the living brand for OIT. I'm just walking living brand.
It's you and Simon and maybe a little bit of Danny in there.
Yeah, there we go.
So today you wanted to talk about past work traumas, past work trauma talks, building trust with your direct reports during new employee onboardings. How do you do that?
Yes. So this was something that was recommended to me by my mentor, Tracy, that works over at Huntress. So she said that it's something that she does when any of her new hires come on board, especially with her direct reports. I thought it was such a great idea that I wanted to introduce it to my team as I was growing my sales team. So I did. And the results were just truly remarkable with the trust that it builds with your direct reports and how seen and heard that they feel, and they just feel more comfortable coming to you with things afterwards as well. Were all things that I noticed after instating it. So essentially what I will do is I will just let them know that, I want to have the talk first of all, because sometimes it can be a little scary when you hear past work traumas and you're talking to your boss about something. People are a little on edge, right? So I'll just say, hey, look, I want to have this talk, and feel free to, the time to talk about anything that's happened, in the past in a work situation where you feel it wasn't handled appropriately, could have been handled better. Maybe you didn't feel respected, because, people take offense to things differently, right? So what I may take offense to, you may not take offense to. It's all on a personal level. So I just let them know that I want to get to know them and, how they work on a personal level with that, because whereas something that might offend them may not offend me, I want to know. So I want to make sure that I don't offend them in those ways. And if they ever have unfortunately experienced a situation in a work environment where they felt like they were disrespected, I obviously want to make sure that I'm not a repeat offender of something like that, which I feel pretty confident I wouldn't be, but you just never know until you have that conversation.
So other than having this conversation right from the beginning of like, hey, what are some of the things you really wish were different at your previous place of work? Like, obviously, you found a new place of work. One of two things happened. You got let go or you left. So something didn't work out. How do you start that conversation with those folks?
So basically, like I just said to you, so I'll just say, hey, look, I want to make sure if you've ever experienced anything in a past work situation where you felt like you were disrespected or you weren't seen or heard, or you feel like it could have been handled better, I want to know about it. So this is the time and space that we have to kind of have that discussion. And furthermore, just anything that, they may feel that is off-putting to them as far as management styles. I'll talk about that as well in the conversation. So preferred management style, or anything that they could foresee may be an issue. If it's hey, if you have a problem with me, I want you to come to me directly and say, this is the issue and I want you to handle it right then. Or maybe the person will say, oh, if I do something, I would prefer you to come to me at the end of the day so it doesn't mess up my workflow and I don't hyper focus on that for the rest of the day. So those are just one example of a scenario that someone could bring to you. But the more you know how to communicate with your direct reports, the better it's going to be. So really, it's just a communication conversation and learning how to properly communicate with your direct report.
What would you say, like how much of your job as a manager is having those conversations versus like when most people think of a manager, they're like, oh, they look at spreadsheets and they make sure X, Y, and Z are happening. And now you're bringing up this like, actually, your job is to manage the relationships, make sure everyone's, I want to use the word honky dory, but like that feels like I'm old if I say it like that. Everyone's having a good time, right? They're not feeling, like you said, disrespected. They're feeling valued, appreciated, like they're contributing to something that the company values. How much of your job do you find is like that stuff and not the managing the spreadsheets and not the trying to get to the outcome together and all that stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say it's a good 50-50 of looking at like reports and spreadsheets and processes and making updates. And then a lot of it is dealing with the team and communicating with them to make sure that things are being handled appropriately. If they do, have any instances, where things go wrong, feeling like they can come to me with it. So that's why I said that you should have these talks at the beginning when they're onboarded, because it's going to go ahead and set you up for success where they feel comfortable coming to you and they don't feel like they're going to be, necessarily reprimanded, because they know that you care. You care about them. You care how they feel. You care that, you want to handle the situation correctly. So it just automatically builds trust in the beginning to have a line of open communication between both of you. So that's why I always suggest that you do it in the very beginning coming on, because it just kind of sets the tone, sets the intention, and creates a comfortable space for them to understand that they can come to you with these things. It could even be, maybe a teammate made them feel, like unseen, unheard, or disrespected. Maybe they wouldn't have come to you in the past and said anything. They would have just been like, oh, I just need to kind of let this roll off my back and push through and continue working. Well, that may work for the time being, but ultimately, if someone feels disrespected or unheard and they just kind of let it fester inside and it doesn't bubble up, that's going to translate later in something else. Maybe they're working with that team member again and it bubbles up over in that scenario because it's just been suppressed for so long. Again, with the like how, things affect people in different ways, people also react in different ways. So the better you can learn how communication affects your direct reports and how to properly communicate with them to get the best results, it just really it makes for smooth sailing in your teams.
You mentioned a really interesting scenario that I'd love some insight on. It's that one of your team members has issues with the way another team member treated them. It's like, so now there's 3 people involved. There's these 2 other team members and you, and obviously both of the team members are going to look for you to, I don't want to say take their side, but definitely resolve the situation in such a way that they feel happy. And in my experience, it's almost never capable of happening, right? You could talk about it and you can arrive at like, oh, this person didn't mean it. And it turns out the situation doesn't exist. But there are some where there's like legitimate issues with the way people are treated. How do you handle those where it's like inter-team member conflict, not with you, but like with each other? You're their manager. It's like you have to step in and sometimes separate them. But like, how do you handle it?
Absolutely. So I would say it's almost always just a communication mishap, right? Because especially when you're working with remote teams, which I think a lot are now. So one, was it a face-to-face conversation? Were you guys on a call together? Was it a, chat that was sent somewhere that maybe was read incorrectly? you've got to kind of decipher what that is first. So I would go into firstly hearing out both sides to kind of understand where they're coming from. And then the ultimate goal would be to get the two team members on a call together to just one, rehear both sides so they could hear, understand, and validate where the other one is coming from, but also understand what the actual intention was. Because you never really know. Just like when you send a text to one of your friends and someone could read that like one way, which you totally meant it something else. You know what I mean? So if you're say, hey, I'm trying to think of a good example here, but you know how text messages can be misunderstood. So same thing when you're working with your teams and you're shooting over chats or whatever it is for how you communicate, whether it's in Slack or Teams or Zoom, whatever it is, you want to make sure that you're properly communicating everything. So I think that's why it's so important to have the initial conversations with your direct reports, because you're going to better understand how to communicate with them. So obviously your team members aren't going to, always know the best way to communicate with each other. But if you know how to communicate with all of your team members and you do have little things that bubble up to the surface like this, you can better handle it and kind of be a good middleman to reach a better outcome for them. Because people, maybe they had a bad day. Maybe they didn't get a good night of sleep and they just took it the wrong way. You never really know. But to really resolve the issue, you have to get in there and know how to communicate to figure it out. The communication is really key.
That makes sense. There's actually a really funny Key and Peele skit all about this where Jordan Peele and Michael Keegan Key are on different sides of text messages. One of them's getting super angry. The other is like blissfully unaware. It's like, oh, this is going to be awesome. I'm hanging out with my friend. And then it just ends up being real funny. Highly recommend going and watching that. I have another question. So when I was a property manager, there were owners of the properties, right? And the owners that we inherited, we couldn't train from the very beginning to say, this is how I'd like you to communicate. This is what I'd like you to do. This is, I expect responses in this way over this time frame. But then every new owner that we had, we set the ground rules immediately. Like these are the expectations. This is how you're going to follow them. And in my experience, there was a stark contrast between the problems I had with new owners and the problems I had with previous owners that I had inherited via, another property management company. And as a result, it's like, I don't really like working with any of these old owners because they're not respectful, like they're not communicating. So my question to you is, do you have a similar situation? Is there some, like you mentioned, have this conversation from the beginning, like make sure that they know that this is an open place where they can, say what they believe to be the truth. And then there's going to be an open discussion about it. Is there a stark contrast between, direct reports or employees, even if they're not your direct reports, that you've been able to set this tone with and haven't been able to set this tone with, and issues that have arisen as a result?
I actually, since I have started building my teams, I have had this conversation with every single one of my direct reports. And I feel like it has been a leading contributing factor in the fact that I don't have that many issues. And if there are an issue, it's one that I feel confident I can resolve because I better understand that person. Even if you're not having it on the new employee onboarding when they directly first come in, let's say, maybe you have a team member that transfers departments, or in my case, I kind of took over another department. So I have sales and client success. So most of the people in client success were obviously already there. I didn't build that team myself, but I still went in and I set meetings with each one of the employees for that department. And we had the conversation. And just opening that door to have the conversation, you learn so much about your direct reports. You would be amazed at how open they kind of get on these calls. Because in the beginning, I didn't expect a whole lot of them, because it could be scary to say, hey, look, to talk about uncomfortable situations. People don't really enjoy having those uncomfortable situations. So I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit like pulling teeth essentially in the beginning, but I didn't have to. They came on and they were like, thank you so much for opening the door for this conversation. I feel like they really respected me for having it for them. And they were very willing to be open and say, hey, look, these things have happened in the past and this is how it made me feel. And thank you so much for caring enough to even ask about it. And, I've taken little tidbits from each one, which obviously I'm not going to share on this call because that's private information, but I've taken little tidbits from each one. And, I'll just make notes on how to best communicate and what their preferences are with the communication. So, I do feel like it has been such a big part of my success with my direct reports. And that's why I wanted to come on today and talk about it. I was so excited after I did it with my sales team and I had such great feedback from it that I actually took it to our manager meeting and I was like, hey, look, everyone needs to do this. Because this was just something that, my mentor recommended that I start. And I was like, oh, I love this. This is such a great idea. And so I did it and I had such great feedback that I actually took it to our management. I said, everyone needs to do this. So now our entire company does it.
That's awesome. I find that sometimes people confuse, depending upon their previous work situations, they confuse like honest questioning, sometimes very intense questioning of like, why did you do these things? Why didn't we get the results? And then disrespect. It's like a lot of times people cross their wires. It's like, hold on. It's like somebody trying to get to the truth here of like, did we do all these things to waste our time because they didn't lead to the result we want? Or did we do them incorrectly because there wasn't enough support, whatever. I find that a lot of people have the habit of taking that as disrespect, and then it requires an outside perspective that's like, hey, hold on. It's like, is it a fair thing? Like I tell this other company, is it a fair thing for anyone in the company to ask how our sales team is doing at any point in time? The answer is absolutely. The sales team doesn't work. It's a company problem because the company stops existing. That's how sales work, right? So it's like, expect to get these questions. You should welcome these questions. And often you'll find people who have nothing to do with sales in the organization have a really fresh perspective of like, why are we saying these things if we can't provide these services and if we'd rather sell this one instead anyway? It's like, actually, yeah, why? Hey guys, why are we doing that? And it's like a really honest, it's a really weird way as it, now that I think it out loud, but a really effective way of getting to the truth.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for being here, Alex. And for folks who wanted to connect with you or connect with OIT, how would you suggest they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I will send over the link for my LinkedIn for anyone that wants to connect with me on there. Or if you want to shoot me over an email, really simple, just alex@oit.co.
Awesome. For folks listening or watching, we'll have links to all that in the show notes. Feel free to connect with Alex, and you'll probably see her if you're on the conference circuit. You'll see Alex somewhere for sure. But thanks so much for being here, Alex. This was a blast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Connor.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in to Gone Fishing. If you want to find out more about high quality security awareness training campaigns, how to launch them in ways that actually engage employees to change their habits, then check us out, FinSecurity, at finsec.io. That's PHINSEC.io. Or click all of the wonderful links in our show notes. Thanks for fishing with me today, and we'll see you next time.